Hello and welcome to this presentation on one of my most favorite subjects, innovation, specifically death by innovation and how to avoid it. My name is Daryl Gibson and I'm an innovation and future trends consultant as well as the founder of a company called Innovative X. Can you identify this object? Well, if you can't, let me share with you that it's a piece of fluff. Why am I showing you a piece of fluff? Because with this presentation, I am also offering you a no fluff guarantee. That's because the information I will share with you is intended to be useful in the real world. No theories here. The intent is to equip you with the tools and knowledge you will need to avoid many common mistakes when innovating in your own company or organization. And for the purpose of this presentation, please note I will be using the words company and organization interchangeably. So with that said, let's dive in. You don't have to go far to see or hear the word innovation mentioned. It's everywhere nowadays, and every company is claiming to be innovative. Here are a few examples of ads I found. But can they all be this innovative? How is innovation done, and what does the word even mean? Mark Twain said, "There were lies, damn lies, and statistics." So I'll let you be the judge of the validity of the following statistics. However, I think we can all agree that innovation is important to many organizations around the world. Yet it's also apparent that many fail in their attempts to innovate. Perhaps it's because while they recognize its importance, they don't really know how to go about implementing it. So let's begin by defining the term innovation. There are many different definitions, so let's keep it simple. Innovation is a new way to solve a problem that results in some kind of deliverable. This second part is very important because while it's fun to sit around and come up with ideas, this is not necessarily innovation. That's because ideas in and of themselves have no value. That comes from the execution. After all, the real purpose of innovation is to produce something tangible that improves the bottom line or furthers the mission. And in defining innovation, we must clarify that while it's often thought of as something to accomplish or some kind of event, is actually a mindset or a way of looking at challenges and solving them. In other words, it's a lens through which we can view the world. And it's more important than ever. Markets move faster than they ever have, and competition is now global, regardless of the business we may be in. You may have heard the expression innovate or perish, and today, more than ever, it's a very true statement. Ignoring innovation is no longer an option. There is a field of study called future trends that is growing rapidly due to the changes in idea development and the markets in which they compete. It used to be expensive, time-consuming, and challenging to bring new ideas to market, and was a sole domain of mid to large-sized companies. Small companies simply didn't have the resources. With the advent of the internet and the democratization of services and information, startups are now able to bring high-quality products to the market within months and disrupt entire industries. For the first time, many mid to large-sized companies find themselves at a distinct disadvantage against these fast-moving and nimble startups. To recapture their edge, they are now focused on trends 5 to 10 years out with high barriers to entry that allow them to turn their large size and resources into assets. When innovation is done right, there are many advantages. It makes sense that when ideas are being generated, new products and services should result, and with them, we should see increased revenues. And if we're asking ourselves, how can we do this better, we should also see costs drop as we become more efficient. But in addition to this, our workforce will also be more engaged, resulting in higher productivity and a significant boost to the bottom line. Perhaps one of the most interesting advantages is that when an organization is not afraid to challenge and re-examine the way it does everything, it becomes its own best competition. If the ability to challenge the status quo is open to everyone throughout the organization, the competition can even be made to become obsolete. Who wouldn't want that? So we've talked about how amazing innovation can be and what it can do for an organization. You may be thinking that you can't wait to get back and begin innovating. In fact, maybe you even have a plan on how to go about it. It's going to be incredible. It will be so good, it'll make Leonardo da Vinci look like a doofus. And then you begin to implement it, and it doesn't go quite the way you planned. Instead of an innovative culture that works like a finely tuned watch, you end up with something more like this. What went wrong? Well, it turns out there are many ways to die by innovation. But before we get into those, let's take a moment to understand how innovation works and its relationship with culture. There was a multi-year study performed by the Kellogg School of Management using data generated from a software platform that helps companies crowdsource ideas. As seen in this graph, they found that the number of ideas a company generates, or the ideation rate as they call it, is directly correlated to net profits, aka the bottom line. In other words, the more ideas generated, the higher the net profit. Through their research, they determined that the ideation rate could be broken down into 4 universal drivers as listed here. They refer to them as universal drivers because they were not influenced by the size of the organization or the industry in which they operated. Some of these drivers are fairly intuitive. For example, the number of participants. Clearly, 1,000 people are going to generate more ideas than a single person. They also refer to this driver as scale. Likewise, frequency just refers to the number of times ideas were generated. More people coming up with ideas more often should come up with more ideas. Engagement is not so obvious, but it refers to the level of participation. Once ideas are generated, they must be grouped and prioritized, and this is where engagement can make a difference. Diversity refers to the degree to which the participants are non-homogeneous or the same. Study after study has proven that the more diverse the group of ideators, the more likely to succeed and profitable the ideas. Diversity applies to gender, discipline, age, background, geography, location, etc. These 4 drivers were found to exist within something called culture, and as it turns out, culture is the root of innovation. To successfully implement innovation, we must first understand culture and how they depend upon one another. Culture can be defined as the way an organization believes and behaves, or the way it looks at the world. As Steve Blank says, it can also be thought of as the behaviors an organization chooses to reward or punish. And whether they know it or not, every organization has a culture. To understand the relationship between culture and innovation, imagine innovation as a plant and culture as the pot. Theoretically, you could take a plant and put it into an empty pot. But without soil, water, and nutrients, that plant won't last long. The same can be said of innovation. If an effort is made to innovate, but the culture is not there to support it, the innovation will survive for only a limited period of time. It certainly will never thrive. This is the most important point I will make today. If you take anything from this presentation, it should be to focus on building an innovative culture before trying to innovate. We'll talk more about how to do that shortly. Culture and innovation typically come from different parts of the organization. There are a few exceptions, but in almost all cases, culture flows from the top. That's because senior level management determines which behaviors will be rewarded or punished. It sets the example. Those of you who have ever had a boss are well aware of how you are expected to model your behavior after what you see from your supervisors who are doing the same for their supervisors. Culture and senior level management are reflections of each other. Innovation, on the other hand, percolates from the bottom. This makes sense since the frontline staff are those that tend to have the most contact with the majority of the stakeholders, such as customers, clients, members, distributors, manufacturers, and so on. They can identify the bottlenecks and are keenly aware of opportunities. On the left-hand side, we can see an example of an organization that tends to fail at innovation. Unfortunately, they are very, very common. You will note that the culture is flowing from the top, and that's okay. However, innovation is also being pushed down from the top, which results in innovation initiatives that are forced on frontline staff and often have little practical application to their work. In fact, the so-called innovation most likely contributes to their workload with little obvious value and may even hamper their ability to deliver the product or service efficiently. This environment creates apathy towards future innovation efforts and causes demoralization, which impacts productivity and then hurts the bottom line. On the right-hand side, we can see a different environment in which culture is flowing from the top and innovation is flowing from the bottom, where they meet in the middle to create this amazing synergy. This is as it should be. So now that we understand how innovation and culture work together, let's talk about a few ways it can kill an organization and how to prevent that from happening. Specifically, I'm going to talk about 5 of the more common methods I've witnessed, although this list is certainly not all-inclusive, as we're constantly thinking up new ways to kill ourselves with innovation. The first is death by bias. It's no accident that bias is a 4-letter word. And by bias, I mean a preconceived notion. Biases are probably one of the greatest barriers to innovation that there is. That's because it causes us to disregard the reality of a situation despite what customers, clients, data, and even the market may be telling us. That's because a bias fools our brain into thinking that we have all the answers and no longer need to be open to other possible solutions. In other words, we transmit rather than receive, and that's a problem because receiving is vital to innovation. The worst possible situation is when a bias is combined with a HI.P.P.O. And when I say HI.P.P.O, I don't mean this kind of HI.P.P.O, or even this kind of HI.P.P.O. I mean this kind of HI.P.P.O. HI.P.P.O is an acronym that means the highest paid person's opinion. A HI.P.P.O that allows bias to cloud his or her judgment is a serious obstacle to innovation. That's because they can have a great deal of influence over the idea development process. How do we prevent this from happening? First, by adopting a disrupt from within mentality. It forces us to examine everything we're doing, even those things held sacred, and ask ourselves, how can we do it better? We remain open to the reality of the situation, thereby receiving instead of transmitting. Secondly, we can use unbiased facilitators to devise strategy, guide ideation sessions, and help manage the overall development process. This suggestion sounds very obvious, but it is often overlooked. It's also the reason why outside facilitators are so often brought in. Ultimately, it's not as important whether the facilitators are internal or external to your organization, rather that they are unbiased and objective to achieve the best results. The second cause of death by innovation is what I refer to as the babe in the woods. I have grown to believe that there are a lot of similarities between babies and ideas. For example, babies and ideas both take a long time to become self-sufficient, and they don't get there on their own. They require many resources in the form of time, energy, and money. But they also have some key differences. Babies enter the world already entitled to all of our time, energy, and money. Ideas, on the other hand, need to earn these precious resources from us. Unfortunately, we tend to throw resources at them, which is a big mistake. So to prevent this from happening, we want to establish milestones that our ideas must meet in order to earn more resources. If they can't meet the milestones, they should not receive these resources. Drop everything is a third cause of death by innovation. It usually originates in the mind of someone in a senior leadership position who suddenly begins to think that their company is not as innovative as it could be. So they begin a 3-step process by going to work the next day and boldly announcing that everyone needs to drop what they're doing and come up with X number of fresh ideas by this time tomorrow. And everyone is excited by this and wants to participate because they're thinking that, hey, the boss is listening and we can really make some positive changes, maybe fix some problems that have been bothering us for a while. So begins step 2 of this process, where the floodgates are open and the ideas flow. Oh, it's a glorious time. But then in the third step, nothing happens. The only thing that can be heard is the crickets in the corner. Absolutely nothing is done with these ideas. If the ideas are collected, they disappear into a nebulous black hole somewhere. To prevent this cause of death, we can begin building an innovative culture first before initiating an innovative effort. And then, of course, we want to have a plan in place so that we know what to do with the ideas once they are generated. The fourth cause of death by innovation is something I refer to as high stakes. It's crazy, but even sophisticated companies tend to approach the commercialization of ideas as if it were gambling. The reason I say this is based on the behavior we often see from large companies and that has trickled down to smaller companies. Obviously, a large company tends to produce large revenues. And so to make a difference in a revenue needle that may be somewhere in the billions requires an idea to be very successful. Relevant to the amounts we're talking about, an investment in the hundreds of millions can seem quite small, and according to this rationale is therefore justifiable. But the problem here is that other than a few exceptions such as biotech, pharmaceutical, some tech, or other ideas that may require a very high initial outlay of capital, 99% of the concepts out there can be tested and developed very inexpensively and with very few resources. Remember that the greater the investment of resources, which in this case is time, energy, and money, the greater the risk. Obviously, if I were to invest $100 into development of an idea, as opposed to $100 million, my risk is going to be much smaller. The way that we prevent this form of death is through something called validation. Validation is a process we use to ensure there is someone out there that wants or needs our idea and is willing to pay a price for it that will compensate us for the cost and profit margin. If these conditions are not met, then the idea is not validated and should be modified and then tested again. Only validated ideas should receive the resources they need to scale up. The fifth and final cause of death I'll cover here is what I call the punisher. Maybe you have known this person or perhaps even been this person. It starts when somebody gets an idea to innovate in some way, maybe improve something or try something new. So they pursue it, but it doesn't quite go as planned. Or maybe they experience failure or make a mistake, as is to be expected in the innovation process. They then become the proverbial nail that sticks up and needs to be hammered back down. Sometimes this takes the form of demotion, firing, a black mark on their record, etc. But whatever it may look like, it sends a message throughout the entire organization that clearly states, don't try to innovate, just do your job. This is a big problem. I know this may sound strange, but there's a good reason for this, and it makes sense once you really think about it. There are essentially two modes in every organization, production and innovation. Production is the main focus of any business. Even if there is no factory or nothing tangible is produced, a product or service is being produced. And when something is done at scale, even small mistakes are magnified greatly and can become very costly. So the focus is on efficiency. Innovation, on the other hand, can produce some amazing things, as it has. But to get there, we have to go through the learning process, which involves making mistakes, failing, and exposing ourselves to risk. And this is where the friction occurs between production and innovation, and why they will always resist each other. To prevent this, it's crucial to separate the experimentation of innovation from production. In other words, encouraging innovation but ensuring it occurs outside of production. For example, if we had an assembly line processing thousands of units per minute, we wouldn't test a new innovation on that line and expose the entire line to the risk of failure. Instead, we'd probably do a mock-up in a controlled environment apart from the main line and only implement the improvement once it was thoroughly tested and successful. Speaking of success, we cannot measure success in innovation in the same way we measure success in production, such as cost per unit, units produced per hour, defect rate, profit margin, and so on. If we do, innovation will fail every single time. We have a different set of metrics for innovation, such as how many ideas were produced, how many were tested, how many passed validation, how many ideas were approved by senior management, or maybe how did they perform when scaled, and so on. Finally, we need to have a culture which tolerates failure. The interesting thing about tolerating failure is that researchers found that when an organization's culture shifted workers' beliefs about failure, in other words, making it okay to fail, employees were more confident to address issues and made, on average, a 30% increase in performance. This is significant. All right, so first I got you excited about innovation and the positive effects it can have on your organization, and now I'm telling you about how perilous it can be. You might be wondering whether you should engage in innovation and take that big step forward. Well, if you're considering this, I would suggest starting out with what I call the mirror test. Simply find yourself a mirror, look at yourself in the face, and ask these 3 questions. The first question is, am I ready to hear from all levels of my organization, knowing that they may not say things that I like or want to hear? The second question is, am I ready to tolerate failure or mistakes? And the third question is, am I willing to challenge perspectives that I hold, knowing they may be very deeply held or are sacred in some way? if the answer to these questions is yes, then you're probably ready to start innovating. However, it's natural to have some concerns, so let me take a moment to address some of those that I hear more commonly. For example, this issue of creativity. As some of you have listened to this presentation, you may be thinking that you or your organization lack creativity and therefore wouldn't be very good at all this innovation stuff. While creativity does have its place in the process and is a wonderful asset, please understand that what really drives the development of ideas is listening, hearing, and remaining objective. These ingredients are the secret sauce of innovation. And there's good news for those of you who don't think they're very creative. Creativity, much like a muscle, can be developed, and everyone has the ability to some degree. In fact, a lack of creativity is even less of an issue than you may think. That's because, regardless of the health of your culture, the ideas are already there. They may not be thriving, but make no mistake, they are there. Give them a culture in which they can grow, and you'll be amazed at how creative your organization becomes. Again, if we use the example of a plant representing innovation and the environment as a culture, it's much like a plant in the desert. It's a tough environment, so they're sparse, but they're there. All it takes is a little rain or cooler weather for them to proliferate. Your culture operates in the same way, and a few small changes can make a huge difference. Sometimes organizations feel like they don't meet the criteria to be innovative. Maybe it's their size or industry or perhaps business model. But whatever the case, the truth is that innovation is for everyone, and none of these things matter. I say that because innovation is relative, and I'm not talking about these kinds of crazy relatives. Instead, I'm saying it's relative to where you are at in the innovation cycle, not where your competition or even industry is at. As an example, my parents had a small retail business for many years. It was indeed a very low-tech operation. They kept money in a coffee mug in the front of the store behind the counter to make change. They also had a lined notebook to write out receipts. Simple changes like replacing the coffee mug with a lockable drawer mounted under the counter that could keep their bills separated, or replacing the notebook with a pre-printed receipt book that they could fill in, would have been innovation as we've defined it. Again, it's relative to where we're at in the innovation cycle. And when you have enough of these small innovations, they begin to look like big innovations. Some people are concerned that, yeah, we do have big ideas, but they're too big, and to pursue them would bankrupt the company or expose us to too much risk. Well, the good news here is that there's nothing wrong with big ideas, and in fact, I encourage you to be unbounded in your imagination. We just want to approach these ideas in small steps. We do this because we know we will experience failure and probably make mistakes as we go through the innovation process, and so to mitigate this risk, we take small steps. By doing so, we can achieve big things and expose ourselves to even bigger opportunities while keeping our risk exposure small. And finally, the biggest concern seems to be with the association made between innovation and technology, specifically innovation taking this form of some kind of complicated technology. Things move fast nowadays, and it's easy to feel like we're being left behind. But the secret of innovation is that it starts and ends with people. Okay, maybe not these people, these are the village people, but you get the point. In closing, I want to leave you with a final thought. H.I.P.P.O said, "People's enthusiasm dies in organizations that don't empower them to be the best version of themselves every day." This is the reason I love innovation so much. When it's done right, I believe it unleashes the true potential of the human spirit. It makes us excited to come to work, to engage, to participate, to create. It makes us feel like we make a difference and that we can bring about positive changes. Of course, all of this generates wonderful ramifications for the rest of the business, including the bottom line. So who wouldn't want that? So that's my story, and I'm sticking to it. I hope you've enjoyed this presentation. Please feel free to reach out to me if you have any questions or comments. Thank you, and make it an innovative day.